In 1874, a Kansas homesteader named Mary Louise Shepard survived 3 weeks trapped in the Great Blizzard with nothing but what her mother taught her on the Oregon Trail. No electricity, no running water, no help within 200 miles. Today, when the power goes out for 48 hours, half of Americans panic. But here's the twist. Number 17 on this list is so effective that United States Army survival schools still teach it to soldiers. And number 3 outperforms a $1,000 water filter you can buy at any camping store. These 25 tricks kept pioneers alive when the nearest help was a week's ride away. And oil companies, appliance makers, and grocery chains spent decades making sure you forgot them. Because here's the truth nobody talks about. If you knew what your great-great-grandfather knew, you would stop panicking the next time the lights go out. Hit subscribe. Let's count down the 25 forgotten Old West survival tricks. Number 25. Banking the fire. Before matches were cheap and common, every frontier family kept a fire burning 24 hours a day, even in July. Your great-great-grandmother didn't let the fire go out because starting one from scratch took 20 minutes of hard work with flint and steel. At bedtime, she would rake the hot coals into a tight mound, then cover them with 2 inches of fine ash, packed down gently but firmly. Come morning, she would scrape the ash away, lay on dry kindling, and blow once or twice. The fire roared back in under a minute. Pioneers called this banking the fire, and it was the difference between a warm breakfast and frostbitten fingers. During a modern blackout, you can do this in any wood stove or backyard fire pit. Properly banked embers stay alive for 12 to 14 hours with zero fuel added. Number 24, the root cellar. Before refrigeration, every homestead had a root cellar dug 6 feet into a hillside with packed earth walls. It stayed a consistent 55 degrees Fahrenheit year-round, even when summer hit 105 degrees Fahrenheit on the plains. Potatoes, carrots, turnips, apples, cabbage, and onions kept for 6 months without a single watt of power. Your great-grandparents stored enough food to feed a family of 8 through a Montana winter, using nothing but dirt and timing. The science is simple. The ground below 4 feet does not freeze and does not warm with the seasons. Your refrigerator becomes dead weight 12 hours into a blackout. A root cellar does not care if the grid is up or down. FEMA listed them in their 2019 Disaster Preparedness Guide. Amish families in Lancaster County never bought refrigerators because their root cellars worked better. Number 23, the sourdough starter. Every wagon heading west in the 1840s carried a jar of bubbling sourdough starter wrapped in flannel. There were no yeast packets and no refrigeration. That starter was a simple mix of flour and water that captured wild yeast from the air, and it stayed alive for decades if fed a spoonful of flour every few days. A prospector named John Bidwell carried his starter from Missouri to California in 1841, and his descendants in Chico still bake with it today. That's 185 years from a single jar. In a blackout, commercial bread goes stale in 3 days, and store shelves empty within hours. A sourdough starter on your counter gives you unlimited bread, pancakes, and biscuits as long as you have flour. No electricity required. The Klondike prospectors earned the nickname sourdoughs because theirs was the only food that never failed them. Number 22, tallow candles. When the sun set on the prairie in 1860, your choices were pitch darkness or burning animal fat. Pioneer women rendered beef or deer tallow by chopping raw fat into cubes, simmering it for hours in a big kettle, and straining the liquid through cheesecloth. Poured into tin molds with a cotton string wick down the middle. 1 pound of tallow made 8 candles that burned for 4 hours each. That is 32 hours of light from meat scraps you would otherwise throw away. A single pioneer kitchen ran on 200 candles a year, made entirely at home for free. Today, a 4-pack of emergency candles costs $12 at the hardware store and disappears from shelves within hours of any storm warning. If you know how to render tallow, you will never sit in the dark again. Number 21. Salt-cured jerky. Long before vacuum sealers or chest freezers, the Comanche and Apache taught pioneers how to preserve meat for 2 years without a single degree of refrigeration. Cut lean beef or venison into strips a 1/4 inch thick, rub with coarse salt and black pepper, and hang on cotton string in a dry, airy spot out of direct sun. In 72 hours, the meat lost 2/3 of its water weight and became leather hard. Sealed in a clean muslin bag in a cool place, it kept for 24 months. A single deer made 40 pounds of jerky, enough to feed a family of 6 for 3 months. When the grid goes down and your freezer fails, jerky is the only meat that survives. The salt pulls water out of the cells, which is the same environment bacteria cannot live in. Pure, simple chemistry. Number 20. Pemmican. First pattern break. Here's where it gets wild. Meriwether Lewis called pemmican the most perfect survival food ever invented, and modern food scientists at Michigan State agree. Take dried meat, pound it into dust with a rock, mix it with equal parts rendered fat, and press in cranberries or chokeberries. Pack the paste into rawhide bags, sealed with more fat. This pemmican stayed edible for 10 years without refrigeration. Arctic explorer Roald Amundsen fueled his 1911 South Pole expedition on it. 1 pound contained 3,000 calories, 3 days of fuel for a working man. The Plains Indians lived on it year-round. You could drop a pemmican brick on the floor and it would not break. The U.S. military spent $40 million in the 1950s trying to reverse engineer pemmican for MRES, and failed. The original still outperforms anything in a modern ration pack. Number 19. The spring house. If your homestead had a cold spring running through the property, you built a small stone shed over it and called it a spring house. The water flowed through a shallow trough cut into the floor, keeping the whole structure at 50 degrees year-round. Pioneer women set crocks of milk, butter, cream, and cheese directly in the flowing water. Milk stayed fresh for a week, butter held for a month, cheese aged properly. A decent spring house replaced a refrigerator entirely, and the only energy it consumed was gravity. Farms in rural Virginia still have working spring houses from the 1820s, some of them holding food right now. In a long blackout, if you have access to a cold stream or even a shaded creek, you can build a miniature version with stacked rocks and a plastic tote in under an hour. Food safety for $0. Number 18. Hardtack. A Civil War soldier's diary from 1863 described hardtack as tooth dullers and worm castles, but that same brick of flour and water kept the Union Army alive across 2,000 miles of march. The recipe is 2 cups of flour, half a cup of water, and a teaspoon of salt. Mix rolled a 1/2 inch thick, cut into 3-inch squares, poke holes with a fork, and bake at 250 degrees for 4 hours until rock hard. Stored dry, hardtack lasts 25 years. A soldier's ration was 9 crackers a day. The Smithsonian has hardtack from 1862 that is still theoretically edible. When the grid crashes and fresh bread vanishes from shelves, hardtack fills your belly for pennies per serving. You soak it in coffee or soup to soften the bite. Pioneers crossed the continent on this single recipe. Before matches became common and affordable in 1870, every cowboy, scout, and homesteader carried a small pouch containing 3 items. They carried a piece of hard flint rock, a curved steel striker, and a handful of charred cotton cloth called char cloth, their kit. Strike the steel down the flint at a steep angle, and a shower of molten sparks lands on the char cloth. The char cloth catches instantly, glowing red. Transfer it to a nest of dry grass, blow steadily, and you have a flame in under 30 seconds. Here's the crazy part. U.S. Army survival schools at Fort Rucker still teach this exact method because when your lighter is wet and your matches are ruined, flint and steel never fails. A complete kit costs $15 on Amazon. During the 2021 Texas freeze, hundreds of families sat in freezing houses because they had never learned what their great-grandparents mastered at age 10. Number 16. The Smokehouse. Second pattern break. The food companies really do not want you knowing this one. A proper smokehouse was a small cedar shed with a fire pit in the ground, smoldering hickory or applewood coals producing cool smoke at about 100 degrees. Pioneers hung hams, bacon, sausages, and whole fish from the rafters for 2 to 4 weeks. The phenols in the smoke penetrated the meat, killing bacteria and creating a protective outer crust. A properly smoked country ham hangs in a North Carolina pantry for 2 years without refrigeration. Here is what nobody tells you. The USDA actually recognizes traditional cold smoking as a legitimate preservation method, but grocery chains lobbied hard in the 1960s to redefine smoked meats as needing refrigeration because they wanted you buying fresh weekly instead of once a season. A backyard smokehouse built from scrap lumber costs $200 and preserves a year's worth of meat. Number 15. Sun-dried fruit. When apple and peach trees exploded with fruit in August, pioneer families could not let any rot. They sliced apples into thin rings, threaded them on cotton string, and hung them across the porch in direct sun. In 3 to 5 days, they shriveled to leathery rings that kept for 12 months in a cloth sack. Peaches were cut, pitted, and laid on clean wood boards covered in cheesecloth to keep flies off. Grapes turned to raisins on the vine with nothing but sunshine. One peach tree produced 200 pounds of fruit, dried to 40 pounds, and that became 2 months of winter desserts from a single tree. The sugars concentrated beautifully and tasted sweeter than fresh. Dehydrators that plug into walls stop working in blackouts. The sun shows up every morning for free, and your great-grandmother used it to stock the pantry. Number 14. Charcoal water filtering. Pioneers crossing the Great Plains drank from muddy rivers, stagnant ponds, and alkaline springs, and most of them did not get sick. Their secret was a layered sand and charcoal filter built into a hollowed-out log or a simple wooden barrel. Bottom layer, gravel. Middle layer, clean sand. Top layer, crushed charcoal from last night's fire. Pour dirty water in the top, and clean water trickled out the bottom spigot in about 10 minutes. The charcoal absorbed organic compounds, bad taste, and most bacteria through a process called adsorption. Here's the wild part. A $300 Berkey filter on Amazon uses the exact same principle with modern materials. The 1849 version worked 90% as well for the cost of burned wood. During a blackout, when municipal water stops being safe, a charcoal filter made from a 5-gallon bucket can save your family. Number 13. Willow bark for pain. In 1845, a wagon master named Ezra Meeker split his leg open on an axe and chewed willow bark for 3 days until the swelling went down. He walked 1,900 miles on that leg. Native Americans taught pioneers that the inner bark of any willow tree contains salicin, which the liver converts to salicylic acid. That is the exact active ingredient in Bayer aspirin. Boiling 2 tablespoons of shredded bark in a cup of water for 15 minutes makes a bitter tea that kills pain, reduces fever, and thins blood. Willows grow near every creek and river in the lower 48 states. When pharmacies empty during a disaster and your medicine cabinet runs dry, a willow tree becomes a free walking drugstore. The FDA officially recognized salicin as a medicinal compound in 1979, 130 years after every frontier mother already knew it worked. Number 12. Pickling in brine. Before commercial canning, pioneer women preserved cucumbers, green beans, cabbage, and carrots in salt brine stored in earthenware crocks. The recipe was simple. 1 tablespoon of salt per cup of water, submerge the vegetables completely, weigh them down with a clean river stone, and let the crock sit at room temperature. Natural bacteria, specifically lactobacillus, converted sugars into lactic acid, creating that tangy pickle flavor and killing everything harmful. Sauerkraut lasted 8 months. Dill pickles lasted 6 months. Kimchi-style cabbage lasted over a year. A 3-gallon crock preserved 15 pounds of produce at a time, and the only equipment needed was salt, water, and patience. Modern studies at the University of Wisconsin proved fermented vegetables actually have more vitamins than fresh ones after 30 days. Your grandmother was right. Fermentation needs no electricity, no refrigeration, and no sealing jars. Number 11. The tallow lamp. When you could not afford kerosene, and most homesteaders could not at 50 cents a gallon in 1870, you made an open-faced lamp from a shallow tin dish, a cotton string wick, and rendered animal fat. Pour liquid tallow into the dish, lay a cotton cord across the rim, light the tip of the wick. The wick drew liquid fat up by capillary action, and it burned with a steady yellow flame for 6 to 8 hours. 1 pound of fat taken from any butchered animal gave you 48 hours of light. You could even burn bacon grease saved from breakfast. Pioneers called it a slush lamp. During a winter blackout, a small dish, a shoelace, and a stick of butter make emergency lighting that never runs out as long as you have fat. Try explaining that to someone frantically searching Walmart for D-cell batteries. Number 10. Honey wound dressing. Third pattern break. This one still amazes doctors today. Pioneers treated cuts, burns, and infected wounds by slathering them in raw honey and wrapping them in clean cotton. It sounded ridiculous, but it worked every single time. Honey is naturally antibacterial because of its low water content, hydrogen peroxide production, and an acidic pH of around 3.5. Bacteria literally cannot survive in it. Here's what's wild. The Mayo Clinic now uses medical-grade Manuka honey on stubborn wounds that will not heal with antibiotics. A 2017 study in the journal Wounds showed honey beat silver-based dressings in 85% of burn cases tested. In 1885, a homesteader's wife in Nebraska dressed her son's axe wound with honey, and he did not lose the leg. During a blackout, when you cannot drive to an emergency room, a jar of raw honey in your pantry is legitimate emergency medicine. Your great-grandmother's old wives' tale is now peer-reviewed science. Number 9. Weather reading. Before NOAA radio and Doppler apps, every homesteader predicted weather 24 hours in advance by watching animals and clouds. Cows lying down in the pasture meant rain within 12 hours because they sensed barometric pressure dropping. Birds flying low meant storms because heavy air forced insects down, and the birds followed. A ring around the moon meant rain within 3 days, caused by high ice crystals in cirrus clouds. Cattle facing north meant a cold front was incoming. A red sky at morning meant a storm approaching from the west. These were not superstitions. They were observations, refined across generations. The Old Farmer's Almanac, published since 1792, still uses these methods and beats the National Weather Service's long-range forecasts, roughly 52% of the time. During a blackout with no phone and no radio, reading the sky still works exactly as well as it did in 1850. Number 8. The reflector fire. A simple campfire loses 80% of its heat upward into the sky. Mountain men figured out that stacking logs or stones in a wall behind the fire reflected heat back toward the person warming themselves. Jim Bridger, in his 1830s trapping journals, described building 3-foot-high reflector walls from green logs that turned a small fire into the equivalent of a wood stove. Sit between the fire and a second reflector, like a tarp, boulder, or lean-to-wall, and you are sandwiched in heat from both sides. A properly built reflector fire keeps you alive at 20 below zero with only armfuls of wood per night. During a winter blackout with no heat, a reflector fire pit in your backyard or a fireplace with aluminum foil backing can keep an entire family warm without a single BTU of wasted energy. Number 7. Sod house insulation. Pioneers on the treeless Great Plains could not build log cabins because there were no logs. So they cut thick blocks of prairie sod, stacked them like bricks, and built houses with walls 3 feet thick. Those soddies stayed 65 degrees in summer and 50 degrees in winter without any insulation, heating, or cooling beyond a small cook stove. The packed earth and grass roots provided an R value of around R40, better than most modern homes. Willa Cather wrote about Nebraska families who survived -40 blizzards in one room, soddies without any frozen toes. Today, when the grid fails and furnaces die, your average suburban home loses heat within 6 hours. A sod-built structure holds heat for 3 days. Some Kansas and Nebraska farms still have soddies from the 1880s, still standing, still insulating, still waiting patiently for someone to move back in. Cotton kills, cowboys used to say, and modern hypothermia research proved them right. When cotton gets wet from sweat or snow, it loses all insulating value and pulls heat away from your body. Wool does the opposite. Even soaked, wool retains 80% of its warmth because its crimped fibers trap air pockets regardless of moisture. A pioneer in 1860 wore a wool union suit, wool pants, a wool shirt, a wool vest, a wool coat, and a wool hat. 6 layers of sheep fur between him and a prairie blizzard. He could fall into a creek, climb out, and not freeze to death. Modern hikers rediscovered wool in the 2000s, and brands like Smart Wool sell base layers for $80 a piece. Your great-grandfather had 5 layers in his closet for the cost of a spring shearing. Cotton hoodies won't save you when the furnace dies. Number 5. The snow cache. When a hunter in Montana shot an elk in January and could not haul all 600 pounds home in one trip, he buried the meat in a deep snowbank and marked the spot with a stick. Snow insulates and freezes at exactly 32 degrees Fahrenheit, acting like a perfect natural freezer. The meat stayed solid for months. Trappers cached everything from hindquarters to buckets of lard this way, returning weeks later to meat that was still rock hard and untouched by wolves because the snow masked the scent. During a winter blackout, when your deep freezer fails, you can cache frozen food outside in a snowbank or under a pile of packed snow. It works for days longer than a dark freezer. My grandmother in North Dakota cached Thanksgiving turkeys this way through every ice storm of her 80 years. Free freezer, courtesy of winter. Number 4. Sassafras and cedar tea. Every frontier cabin kept bundles of dried sassafras root, white cedar tips, and mint leaves hanging from the rafters. When cold season hit, and it hit hard in the days before heated homes, mothers brewed a tea from these 3 plants that dramatically reduced cold symptoms. Sassafras root contains safrole, which is a mild anti-inflammatory. Cedar tips are loaded with vitamin C, about 5 times more than oranges by weight. Peppermint opens airways. The tea cleared sinuses, eased coughs, and brought down fevers within hours. A cupful taken 3 times daily broke most colds in 48 hours. Modern pharmacies sell cold medicine with 15 chemicals and a $25 price tag. Your great-grandfather walked outside, gathered leaves, and brewed a cup for free. During a blackout when drugstores close, knowing 3 useful plants in your yard is worth more than a full medicine cabinet. Number 3. Boiling water with hot rocks. 4th pattern break. Here's the one that outperforms a $1,000 water filter. Pioneers who had no metal pot big enough to boil water used a technique they learned from Shoshone traders. Dig a hole in the ground, line it with a fresh-killed animal hide, or even a tightly woven basket sealed with pine pitch. Fill it with creek water and drop in fist-sized river rocks heated red-hot in the fire. The rocks transferred their heat instantly. Within 3 minutes, the water reached a rolling boil, killing every waterborne pathogen from Giardia to cholera. Pioneers drank from muddy cattle ponds this way and did not get sick. The CDC now confirms that boiling for 60 seconds kills 99.99% of biological contaminants. A $1,000 Katadyn filter removes 99.9999%. The difference in a survival situation is meaningless. Hot rocks in a hide-lined pit work when every electronic filter in your garage is dead weight. Number 2. Water by watching wildlife. In arid Nevada and Arizona, pioneers found hidden springs by observing bird flight patterns at dawn and dusk. Mourning doves always fly toward water at sunrise and away from it at sunset. Bees travel in straight lines to and from water sources, and a bee's range is only 3 miles, so following one tells you water is close. Ant colonies build near shallow underground water. Converging animal trails almost always lead downhill to a spring or seep. Cottonwood and willow trees only grow where their roots can reach permanent water, so spotting a lone cottonwood in the desert means a spring within 100 feet. These tracking skills saved countless wagon train families in the Southwest. During a blackout, when municipal water pipes fail and your bottled reserves run out, knowing how to read the landscape is worth more than a case of Fiji water. The animals have been finding water for 10,000 years. They know. And finally, in first place, number 1, lard, the pioneer pantry, miracle. One resource did more to keep pioneer families alive than any other single substance, and modern Americans threw it in the trash. Rendered pork lard was used for cooking, baking, frying, waterproofing leather, sealing preserved meat in crocks, lubricating wagon axles, making soap, treating chapped skin, healing burns, conditioning hair, and fueling lamps. A 300-pound hog yielded 30 pounds of lard that lasted a family a full year in the pantry without refrigeration. Stored in a clean stoneware crock in a cool spot, it stayed fresh for 12 months. Here is the shocking truth. In the 1950s, Procter & Gamble spent $50 million convincing American housewives that Crisco was healthier than lard. It was not. A 2017 Harvard study confirmed that lard contains less saturated fat than butter and is one of the healthiest cooking fats available. Meanwhile, the hydrogenated oils that replaced it turned out to cause the heart disease lard was blamed for. Pioneer families thrived on it. We threw it away and got sicker. During a blackout, a single crock of lard replaces shortening, butter, cooking oil, lamp fuel, and wound salve. One ingredient, 100 uses. Your great-great-grandmother's kitchen ran on this magic substance, and we forgot on purpose. Here's my challenge to you. Pick one of these to actually try this week. Just one. Render a pound of lard, build a flint and steel kit, brew a willow bark tea, or dig out the space for a root cellar. Then come back and tell me your great-great-grandparents were wrong. Tell me these skills don't work. I tried every single one, and my pantry looks different now. There's a crock of lard on my counter, a sourdough starter in the cupboard, and a pouch of char cloth in my kitchen drawer. The next blackout doesn't scare me anymore. Share in the comments which trick you're trying first, because these aren't just pioneer tricks. They were wisdom that corporations spent millions erasing from American memory. Your great-great-grandmother knew. Now you know too.